Okay, can I please request the backbenchers to come forward? This is not a class, and I think for everything that I've said about Akash, he's actually a very nice person. Some common connections between Akash, Ankit, and myself, and which anyway goes to speak volumes. Ankit is currently the
A long time, yes.
Worked at then later Hotstar, very recently IT technology worked at Viacomm, technologist at Park, and although we've like Zena said, had common connections all this while, this is the first time I get to meet you in person, so amazing meeting you. Thank you so much for coming.
Likewise, like.
Awesome. So I think let's just set up the agenda first. We'll keep it focused around SRE, engineering, and more sort of practical. We'll also keep it very important. So during the interaction, sort of pitch in. I see a lot of other speakers from SRE. So I want you guys to also, pitch in your thought process and any other point that you guys want to raise. And let's get started on this. So I think first question that I would love to sort of understand is more to sort of set the base for everything else, which is in your mind this whole ecosystem of managing the non-functional technology, which is SRE, DevOps, platform engineering, production engineering. How do you essentially, in your mind, how do those abstractions fit together, and how does this whole sort of name suit work?
Look, I think depending on the size of the organization, we are sitting in PhonePe. You guys have grown. All of us, in fact, I'm sure all of organizations have grown from small to being really large. As you grow, and classic scaling, right? In the beginning, everything is handled by everyone, and then as you start to grow, then you realize that there are specialists, and effectively, you're sharding time away from people doing their best work. And that's when you start to create these functions, right? If you look at the evolution of anything, this might do is, whether it is, DevOps coming out of pure play engineering saying, well, I built it, now I have to deploy it, and you spend whatever, 6 weeks, 7 weeks, whatever it is, paying out certs, machines, like, hey, this can be automated, someone else can do this, or there are focused people that can do it. And that's how your DevOps function over time came about, right? And SRE is similar in nature, I would say, in terms of abstraction, if you want to think about it. My personal view again, and my teams are always insist that the engineers who build it are responsible for supporting it. It's an unpopular view. I've lost a lot of engineers because of it as well. But effectively, that's how I like to operate. But that doesn't mean that an SRE function by itself is deprecated or it has a different meaning. My view again is go there, think about QA, right? A lot of times people say, well, we have a quality team. Let me write my code and throw it over the fence. Someone else should test it and be responsible for quality. Again, I don't subscribe to that. So SRE sort of fits in the same bucket for me. So that's how the group kind of focused on it. And again, sort of building that sort of ownership, that sort of telemetry that can come from creating groups like that. But again, if you get them focused on very basic things, test my software, look at my dashboard, that's not deriving value. But again, there are many senior technologists, so we'd love to hear from you, and this is all very basic stuff.
Awesome. So, if sort of we think of two different functions, DevOps and SRE. SRE is what I would focus on primarily as the people who ensure that systems are, which is really as the people who ensure that systems are, which is essentially someone who goes, keeps the lights on, has metrics, has instrumentation, has observability, someone who sort of keeps the lights on. So this is a particularly important area because as you imagine, across the spectrum, across industries, across sizes of the organizations, one of the core values that engineering aspires to is essentially product should work seamlessly, and there should be no interruption in how users interacting with their product. So if you want to boil up to the basics and sort of try to distill it into what is the MVP of an SRE? What is the most core deployment of an SRE in any organization, which can be across sizes, across organizations, across domains. These what are some of the things which SRE shouldn't do without?
I was telling Bhati is a tough one to answer. I don't know what the usable product on this thing looks like, right? If you ask me, there is no 80-20 on this. Great. But working backwards from saying, I hear very few leaders talk about, well, what are all the systems responsible for delivering customer value? This will involve vendors. This will involve other tertiary things where the customer surface is exposed, and sometimes those get missed, right? And of course, as you burn your fingers, as I'm sure a lot of people in this room have done, you realize, man, okay, you have to focus on that. So, starting with again, basically, you've got to know what your experience or customer value services. I'm deliberately calling it that. It's not the services, it's resources, it's your apps, it's your vendors that provide capability. And starting with that effectively, then saying low bar, okay, what's the one thing, let's say, right? Again, if I'm oversimplifying it, that tells me whether this is smoking or it is about to die, right? So drop the, identify, drop your monitors. Then once you have that, drop your alerts on top of it. And the hardest thing I think teams struggle with, and I don't know if this resonates with you guys, is the culture of on call. Nobody wants to be on call. I mean, again, I've through all the teams I've managed, I've always gotten feedback from my engineers that there's been it's sometimes it's good to be the boss and you can enforce it saying that you have to do this, but effectively, it's not common to carry pages to effectively be responsible to be on an on-call schedule. This is the hardest bit. So if you can get past that, and you can create a cadre of engineers who is responsible. One of my oversimplification of this is that hey, if you're a senior engineer, you have to be on call. There is no choice. This is part of your meets expectation goal if you work on one of my teams. There is a two-pronged thought in there. One is, of course, it builds empathy to other systems. Rather than say, hey, I am an expert on my amazing microservice that drives the whole business, and everything else is not important. So it builds empathy and humility. And second, of course, I think it allows us to create better architects, better products. Again, because it increases that collaborative surface, more opportunities to collaborate outside of purely, hey, let's Ankit and me are delivering some customer value. So we work with each other, and hence we are buddies. We are in the trench together on call. I'm going to be a better friend to Ankit than otherwise. So going back, identify, then on top of it, figure out what's going to kill you, or have to preferably two measures what's about to kill you and what's going to kill you. Alert, figure out who the alert goes to, right? And then act on it. And this is again the hardest part. Talk about MVP. Many times I've seen teams come up to the on-call bit, but the incident management protocol is left up to the first incident. So whenever an incident happens, then people are scrambling and saying, well, okay, how do we, what happens? A lot of yelling and screaming. Been there, done that, right? So incident management protocol, figuring out how to tackle, when things happen, what are some clear rules, right? A lot of, I take a lot of inspiration from, Formula 1 patterns, or my teams are being used, the army as an example. It's a bit morbid, but it's actually the classical incident management playbook. Right? No one's asking questions when bullets are firing around you. So everyone has clarity on what needs to happen. Not to say it's not scary, but such are incidents. And then, so I'd say at least this is the MVP. And I tack on retrospection and improvement later. But let's say if I was to compromise, I'd say this would be my MVP.
No, I think I agree with most of your points, but I do want to click on essentially the service owner should be on call. Right? Now, honestly, I feel like there are models which are both ways. I don't think it's a clear win one way or the other. There are large organizations like Amazon which actually insist on service owners being on call. And then there are larger organizations, which are really large organizations of SREs offer escalations of support. And at some point in time, obviously, in the escalation path, the service owners to come in. And in on-call roster, it is the first line of defense, second or last. It generally it's a tradition, not even a binary thing. But let me do a quick poll here. How many here have worked on or are in the trenches of any of the SRE, DevOps, production or core engineering functions? Show of hands. And how many here are developers, service owners in the part of product delivery? Awesome. And how many of you are really determined step on the speed? Okay, those guys are not here. Oh, there is one. Awesome. So, see, I completely agree with that in the whole escalation path, service owner should be there at some point of time. But what is undeniable is that there is a source of stress and anxiety in being in that chain. And there is a heavy factor of burnout that has been observed by me personally, my engineering calls, and you sort of seen it. So, what is it that makes first being in the loop so hard? And second is, what is it that we as leaders can do to actually make this easier? Because no one denies that the incentives should be aligned. So those who are churning out the code should be accountable for the quality of that code, the delivery of experience that is being done by the code. But at the same point of time, the way it is in practice applied leads to tremendous pressure on engineering, right? So as leaders, for us, it's an easy decision to say, okay, they should be in the loop, they should be first, second, third, off if something goes wrong. But as leaders, also have the responsibility to then create enablements for them in the organization. What are some of those things that come to your mind? Where do most organizations stand?
It's a function of maturity, Ankit. I think if over time your SRE function or in general your platform has got to a point where you've stabilized telemetry, you have, let's say, set playbooks where first responders can actually mitigate smoke, then yes, I think your service owners have perhaps earned the right to be once or twice removed from handling the problem statement. The challenge is that most organizations have a lot of churn. B, again, depending on size and a lot of, I don't know if this resonates with you, Ankit, but a lot of our organizations end up working as micro startups, right? Effectively, you're all chasing separate product lines, smaller teams, and moving with high agility. So there isn't a time to settle. This is perhaps a big company outcome versus a more nimble, fast-paced organization outcome. So it's a line to tread. The burnout is very real. You're right. And I think, so one of the strategies we end up using is, this is where all senior engineers must be on calls comes from. Of course, with training, your team on call first before you become, I do this sort of layer on call, which I learned back in the day from, my time at Open Table, where effectively we have we have this thing we call incident manager on call. So we have one czar of incidents, right, or czarina of incidents. If there is a problem, this person is on call 1 week every 6 months or so. And this person has effectively graduated from being team on call to learning how other systems are operating, right? So they build knowledge. We've had, for example, Android engineers be IMOX and things like that. It's a very scary experience. And we definitely, the core group of leaders that we have, and again, you've got to, this is a luxury, I'll say. Sometimes you have it, sometimes you don't. Definitely in the settling in phase, you should expect, I have seen very high burnout. Especially when your alerts are not tuned, there's a lot of noise, stuff gets lost. So that is the phase where, again, culturally, you've got to guide the group through it and say that, you've got to keep the faith, right? And it's not different from, launching impossible products, right? You're building a product and at some point you're like, man, I don't know why we're doing this.
Whose idea was it? And why are we climbing this impossible peak? But as a leader, you've got to reassure your team, hey, look, there is a larger goal we are chasing. So you've got to work through that, no doubt about the burnout. But the onus again becomes on trying to work yourself out of a job. This is not very different from, let's say, imagine you had a senior engineer and you had some attrition, and this person somehow has become the owner of the tribal knowledge that the whole service or this person is going to burn out because everyone is going to go to this person and say, boss, hey, how is this working? I'm stuck on this particular issue. I can't go further. How do you deploy this? There's a production issue, blah, blah, blah. So what is the playbook to work yourself out of that role? This is the same sort of a playbook, right? And again, it's depending on the organization, the culture, your mileage will vary. So it isn't you said it, and I agree with you. There isn't a silver bullet, no one size fits all. You got to like see and adapt for sure.
Both in terms of prioritization, in terms of, or like you said, the person who is the keeper of the tribal knowledge is the first pillar to go, and he is also the most critical pillar to go. So you essentially load him till failure. And how do you come out of this recurring problem is one of the most, I'd say, classic problems that every organization will face. And true leaders are made when they identify all that as an organization. And like I think all of us who've been in that position know that you would carry a lot of guilt of sort of not enabling that solutioning faster. But all the future leaders of SRE, I think this is one of the core heart of the problem that goes into how viable or feasible your response as an organization can be made by an SRE or a developer. So again, double clicking on sort of the same theme of responding to business outages. How, like in at Ola, one of the key realizations that we had as a business leader was that the metrics to monitor, obviously you look at all the L0 metrics of every service, but we did a brief experiment of essentially instrumenting business and having business metrics be part of the SRE agenda or SRE observability, where we would look at, let's say, price per kilometer, discount applied, GMV, all the business metrics, business outcome metrics, and any blip in that was essentially treated as serious an outage as, let's say, a spike in latency. In your mind, is that going beyond the charter of SRE? Is that sort of a structure or a model you see becoming more and more commonplace when it comes to SRE? Or you think that's essentially SRE is becoming a catch-all function for everything in the organization? You are just looking at it beyond mandate. How do you sort of square this?
Yeah, so I don't think so. I think we are all engineers here, so the naming limits the scope, right? And it will hurt everyone's head to say that well, you said site reliability, and now you're telling me to do business reliability. What the hell? Right? Change my name. But again, if you recall, I was working backwards from saying what's your customer service, and how many times have you had all your services are green, everything is hunky-dory, but you're feeding revenue somewhere, and you don't know till some business person or some operations person does a review a week later and says, wait a minute, what happened here, right? And you're like, well, we were all green. So this is a classic, it's not my problem. And this is again a smell of low ownership. So effectively, if you come back and if you step back and think about it, we are all part of whatever organization we are a part of, because we are trying to solve some customer, we are here to provide some customer value. If whatever we have built is not providing that customer value, that's a problem. It doesn't matter if your tech is working or not working. We're losing the audio. It's cutting in and out.
Yeah, I think there's some glitch, but as long as it works, 90% of the time you speak, it's good enough. Okay.
We're having a live failure right now.
Okay, then shifting gears from SRE to, let's say, DevOps, right?
Sorry, what is that? Oh, it's a column. So you should give this one. Excellent, we have sidecar.
I think so. Awesome. So, as I was saying, let's switch gears from SRE to DevOps for a minute, right? DevOps, if you look into sort of the mandate of DevOps in the way it has changed in the last decade, right? A lot of times it used to refer to operations to support development, which was essentially provisioning servers, configurations, provisioning environments, getting the data center ready for consumption, versus the way sort of the DevOps to platform engineering kind of migration is happening, which is automating everything which is operational and giving a self-serve platform back to the engineers, so the operations especially becomes a organizing function in itself. How has that evolution and that journey been in your mind? Is that loading engineers with operations of DevOps and trying to sort of cut costs or going into super optimization? Or do you think that's a function of just the maturity of the ecosystem and that's a trend which you feel will essentially be the morph that DevOps will have to re-engineer and reinvent yourself into?
I think classically, I think when I was exposed to DevOps many years back, it was always about, creating, enabling engineers. Again, just like the quality function, as I was alluding to earlier, I think we've the maturity or this is ecosystem maturity, if you want to call it that, of what the role really entails, right? And it's a function of, again, talent and the pace people are running at and what people are trying to do. That has evolved and it has gotten to the point where what, the way you are articulating it. Effectively, again, classically, if we are engineers and, we are doing repetitive things, then we are really not leveraging our engineering abilities. So, it's coming down to that where you're saying, man, you created the DevOps function, but all they do is deploy. They are effectively release managers sometimes. You're like, well, I didn't sign up for this. So it's just a growth of the cadre or the talent that may have gone there maybe. And then again, depending on how the organization is moving, I think, again, developers are responsible, or builders are responsible for their quality, and effectively you start to tread into, productivity now, right? That what does it take to, think about creating, think about CI/CD, right? Now, is this a DevOps thing or is it a, developer thing? You were spending time, at some point someone said, man, this is taking up a hell of a lot, let me write scripts. And now suddenly, you've got Jenkins, you've got, GoCD, whatever, right? Eventually people productized it because it saved them time. It was a productivity function. So I think it's a function of maturity and a recognition that, hey, how are you eking out productivity from very costly and scarce resources, all of you? Right? So as a leader, I'm always saying, man, I have only so many data engineers. If all my data engineers are cleaning data, then when are they creating applications? So, you start to get into those sort of conversations, right?
So if you were doing a startup again, when would you bring DevOps as a function? Would you start with automating release and just never having a DevOps? Or do you think there is a shortcut that is inevitable and that there is a hop to the automation and platformization that every organization goes through?
If I was doing a startup now, I'd expect to throw everything away in a year. I'd just hack my way to, get to the customer faster. That being said, again, I would think, if I was to do a startup and, you end up working with very sharp operators, the sharpest operators, and I just feel, at least, it is the nature of sharp operators to, create strong structure around them. So yes, for maybe like 3 weeks, we'd hack our way through it, and then someone would get pissed off about it and say, no, this is not going to work. So that's how I see it. But that being said, again, I'd say, we shouldn't be afraid to. There's a lot of sunk cost bias in teams, and periodically groups need to, throw their children away. The quote children away, not your real kids, to be clear.
Yeah, we'll read between the lines there.
But I think, Jay, I'm looking at you for every question, and I think there was a particular smile that you threw at your colleague, and when I asked the question of DevOps versus platform engineering. So, in your mind, where do you fall in that spectrum? And would love to sort of pitch in and hear about you, especially because you have a very atypical platform today, which is private data centers versus cloud, and it just becomes it essentially boils away all the abstractions and brings you to the root of things. So would love to hear from you how you've been sort of managing it and yeah.
Come.
You can come here only, pull up a chair.
Yeah, to be on the record, I was smiling because that thing made it worse.
Yeah, this is something SREs hear a lot.
Yeah, so like I'll give you my 2 cents on how I see devs versus DevOps versus SRE, right? And I have a tendency of making analogies. So I'll give you a totally abstract analogy, right? Let's look at a car. A developer is someone who designs a car, right? A DevOps is somebody who will take that design, put all the pieces together, and build the car. And SRE is somebody who will build the road and paving infrastructure so that car can run. Right? Now, as time evolves, you will get more and more complex cars, more and more functional cars. Now, from DevOps side of things, yeah, you can go manually go and assemble the cars, or you can go build assembly lines, use robotics, use all kind of smart telemetry, smart instrumentation, whatever you think of making the build process faster, better, cleaner. That is all DevOps. Now, from SRE point of view, yes, you can build a plain or vanilla highway, or you can put toll roads, you can put one-ways, you can put traffic congestion algorithms, whatever you think of, that is all where SRE comes in. That whatever is your product, the product runs the way it is supposed to run. It is reliable. That's the whole part of the site reliability. Right? Now everything that you put after that is just to solve that one function. It's that, will my customer get what I promised him? Will he be getting the experience that I am promising him to get? Right? Now, from that the whole outlook and roles and responsibility and KRA discussion starts on what my DevOps team, like another for the record, we do not have a DevOps team. While we run one of the largest infrastructure, we do not do DevOps. We have site reliability engineering and we have this. That's the other way of putting it. Like, we don't know who does the DevOps. Like we have CI, we have CD, but it all comes natural to us. Like, yeah, you need it. Like we go by the philosophy of do not repeat yourself. If something is done manually for more than X number of times, you better automate it. Now, who automates it takes it's a judgment call.
I agree. I think honestly, a lot of organizations today might not have the classical DevOps, right? And for example, we pivoted from DevOps to platform engineering, which was essentially the ones who used to sort of build the build the sort of machine, right? But if I extend your analogy, right, we essentially define the three functions. As the organization complexity increases, I would think that all of these become specialized roles, where the person who does their job very well, versus a collaborative role where everyone goes all three in a room, every problem solved it, come back. Now, in spirit, every technology leader wants deeper collaboration, people working in lockstep. But in expectations, they want super specialization where SRE has taken responsibility of one thing, Dev has taken responsibility of one thing, DevOps has taken responsibility of one thing. Now, as leaders, I want to set up the organization for failure because, as we were discussing earlier, there should be the path of, let's say, on call, which means we are actually going on the job of SRE. So, at some level, how do you sort of taking the analogy further? Where do you start to say, okay, I'm specializing, not everyone needs to jump in for every problem, versus, okay, everyone should be held accountable for what they are doing and what pain they are giving to the other one, so everyone should be cumulatively accountable. And how role gets, how does that, say, policy gets resolved? Like, it's a good point that you brought up an on-call, right? Like, it's the same analogy, right? Three functions, three distinct functions, but there has to be an overlap, right? That is the key thing. Now, that overlap could be the sharing of responsibilities, or it could be as simple as communication. Right? Now, having said that, yes, after a certain scale, you will need specialists, and you will need generalists. Now, in my opinion, how it works out is the higher up the ladder the person is, more generalist he is supposed to be, so that he can point to a right specialist to come and look at it. That is one way of looking at it. The other way is from on-call's point of view. There are three things again. First thing is knowing that something is broken. Second is identify what is broken. Third is going and fixing it. Right? And as engineers, we always try to bridge the gap between all three together. Can we immediately know what exactly is broken? Can the system auto heal itself? Right? And that is like a nirvana statement. Yeah, my system broke, identify this is broken and fixed, so I can go and run it. But that doesn't happen. So the way in which I look at this is, once an on-call person gets a page, for example, this is broken, there can be only two things. Either he goes, fixes it, or if he can't fix it, he immediately calls up a person who can fix it. And only thing that we need to do is enable him to know who is that right person. Right? I don't want anybody in my domain to not know that, okay, this system is broken, so I don't know what to do, I will keep my hands on each other and just wait and pray. That doesn't work. Right? So one solution is just have a list of responsible people in your mind. Okay, if this system is broken, it's okay, I don't know how to fix it. But I know one person who might know how to fix it. Just call that person. Awesome. So I think now it's getting to actually some real practical experiences that we've had when we were in the trenches, right? And this is an area where we've all been doing it for decades now, more than that. So I'm sure when I say that outage really was something, a story comes to everyone's mind, right? Akash, I think I would love to start with you. Give me that story of when you were in the trenches and you essentially were.
I mean, many things. I think, I remember. Hello. It's working. Okay. Yeah, couple of incidents. I don't know, some incidents I can't talk about, but I'll, I remember one from my active coding days, and this was, we had a big database migration, and it so happened I had some test script when we eventually ended up dropping the database, so not the production database, and we had an opportunity. It was, this is after a lot of rigorous review, and we had a downtime for maybe 30 minutes, and that was probably one of the most scary things in my career that I remember. So, for what as luck would have it, back then, you had that one person you could call. We were a very small team, just back at Oakdale, and we were, able to bring it back. Fortunately, there weren't too many transactions that had to be reconstructed. But yes, that was a very scary moment. More recently, again, I think we've had many stories. I don't know what I can specifically talk about without giving too much away. But let's just say that again, as we've all had our scale challenges, but typically, Bhati was talking about earlier that sometimes there are incidents and it turns out to be the smallest thing. And I remember this one time we were really prepped up. It was going to be a very high concurrency day. I remember that first season that we did IPL, nobody really knew, right, that how now there is a sense of people look at it and say, oh, there's going to be so many crore people, but back when we first did it, no one had a clue, right? There were very interesting conversations where effectively our compute vendor came and told us, well, if there's no more compute left, or you're only about 5% away from completely using the, they're like, okay, I'll take that input. I don't know what I should do with it right now. Customers keep coming. So we've had stories like that where we've had to drink, and this is one particular story I'll tell you. I'll anonymize it as much as I can, but effectively very high concurrency day. And
Which match was it?
Sorry,
Which match was it?
I'm not going to tell you that. But and the team had killed themselves. And I don't think we slept for multiple days, right? So we are pretty much running on fumes, which is a terrible thing to do. But sometimes it's the adrenaline that just drives you. The event starts, and it's taking your car analogy. It was like you were driving with the handbrake on, right? You're pressing full throttle, but your handbrake stops. You're like, oh, what the hell is going on? And all our systems were green, everything was fine. Then someone said, well, what about this? Try to look at our vendors then. This one particular person, they said, we were going around saying, well, okay, all is well. So like, what TPS are you running? Oh, I'm running this XXX, great. What's your failure? And of course, this one person comes back and says, oh. And it turned out that, this one person that we assumed was working was probably the least of our worries. Was running the service on deprecated hardware, 2 instances. One of them was dead. The other was maxed out and was basically failing almost 70% of the request. And we had 2 people. And again, given the intensity of the customers don't know this. Customers are coming in droves, right? This is like a tsunami traffic, right? We have no control over this sort of thing. Consequently, that caused so much of back pressure in all our systems. Even after, I'd say, I remember my team being really freaked out after that day. At the end, when everything got done, I remember walking out and saying, this was a really good day, and everyone looked at me and said, what's wrong with you? This is a terrible day, right? But it was a really good day because that day we pushed our system almost 4 times of whatever it was rated prior to anything in the lab, because it was impossible to create this in the lab. And the system held. Of course, we figured out what walls to open and got things back on track as we did. But it's stuff like this, Bhati, right? That you end up, nothing really prepares you for it, and then you're in the middle of it. Again, I'm very fortunate to have very strong, engineers and leaders with me who were just like amazing at triaging stuff. And yeah, so awesome. I think you can't be spared from the stories. Hey guys, good evening. Am I audible?
Yes.
So, we don't have those many war stories, but the one that I can recollect, when these were the days when the founders wanted to shut down our servers at 8 p.m. to save money. So the servers would go down at 8 p.m. and come back at 8 p.m. The first time when we set up UPI, so I was sent to the DC, I didn't know anything. And we had a couple of switches and a few servers. And then when I go there, I realized actually you need a firewall device to connect. So we don't have it. So I go buy it on Amazon, a cheap home firewall, and put it in the DC. In fact, the security and all the guys were like, you can't take this device. So luckily I purchased 2 devices. So one was on standby, and that didn't support, the home routers don't support standby. I just bought it because, what if that device is no longer available on Amazon? So I bought 2 of those, kept one there, and yeah. So the DC is in Mumbai and we are in Bangalore. And then we are going full swing, right? We are doing this UPI and all, and then the DC goes unreachable. I knew what the reason is. and we are in Bangalore. Luckily, we had Flipkart helping us. Called up the Flipkart guy. He took an hour and a half because this DC was very far from the existing location. He went there, replaced it to the second one. The first one was faulty. So the good thing is that at that point it became very easy for us to convince that if you can solve a problem for money, you should do that. Don't save. So that's how we think. I think that's one of our first. The other one I can remember is, I don't really remember, we had an issue on payments for one of the components, I don't know, where the moment the system came up, it would go down.
Yes, I remember.
And we tried to scale the app, anything you do, it would go down. And the entire company was focused on it. We tried to figure out what it is. And then after about 6 to 7 hours of troubleshooting, I think somebody found out that they had a recursive loop in a program without a break. And so it would come recurse and die. So luckily it was not a critical component, but the problem is sometimes, small things, if you have recursion or something and if you're sharing these services, it has the potential to bring other services down. So here, of course, I think it took many places to solve the issue.
I think, see, this is where I break character and I'll share my stories as well. Both the incidents that you mentioned, these are some of the top two funniest incidents that I have seen, right? The first one was, it's very early days, Ola was not Ola Cash, it was Ola Trend, right? And we were doing online travel packages discovery now. Website is done, we have a few users coming. So there is one very important user to which we have to give demo because that guy was not write us a check. So Bhavish is at there doing presentation to an investor. And the website is not open. Now it's a simple thing. It's 2009, so there's not even a cloud. It's a virtual private server that you log in and just do some restart or something and come out. It's a PHP application. What can go wrong, right? So that's what can go wrong is that I won't have electricity in my apartment. And no Wi-Fi in my apartment for me to go and log in. So, and I used to live exactly opposite of IIT Bombay. So I took my bicycle, my laptop, bicycle inside IIT Bombay campus, connected to the Wi-Fi, restarted the service, and it was just so crazy because this whole thing had to happen in 5-10 minutes. Because Rohit said he's taking a break, he's coming. I would have driven the fastest to get this done. Right? But the other one is actually my personal favorite, and so a bit of context. I think all of us can relate that as startups are growing, the earliest code that you write is the earliest code that you run, and the earliest code that you write is mostly written by the person who will eventually become your boss. In my case, I had written a basic API which would essentially connect to the mobile device, take location, save it. Right? It took a bit of a state management and all those things. But think of this as that old rickshaw game to chakya. And as more and more people join, senior people join, who could actually do job much better than I could, they built out an amazing Ferrari with this rickshaw, which is rickshaw ka pahya, and that's how our whole system was. And that pahya worked really well for the longest of time. Obviously, when people join, the fastest hack that I says, we are going microservices architectures are available, and then we call each other and say we are modern architecture. That's what we did. And one day this chakra stopped rolling. And everyone is diagnosing, I am the author, so I also am on the call trying to diagnose. It's a simple PHP function, does nothing. Now it has been whittled down to basically the proxy and over. But everyone in the organization, every service owner is not looking into the call to solve it. In debugging it, what we realized is that in the microservices architecture that we created by accident, one service, another service ended up calling the same service again. So we created a cyclical dependency onto my service. And in production, I don't even remember the code to sort of figure out how to fix it. So in production, we are essentially creating a separate deployment of that service, changing the routing to ensure that any cyclical dependency cause the new deployment, so the whole deployment and essentially works again as an architecture. And just a day before, I was telling everyone on call, production, hotfixes, what's the process, what should happen, what is the bare minimum process. And there I am essentially undoing everything that I said, creating this server, changing code in live, changing config in live, and making the system live while there are millions of users who are looking for the service.
All bets are off in a system.
Yeah, exactly. So there's a thing, tells you that armchair, and I forgot the rule, right? Because at some point I was in the trench, and then once I got on my armchair and said, oh, how hard can it be? These are the processes, do your hotfix, this is the on-call person who will validate it, someone will check it, then it gets deployed, there should be complete changes going into the system, and then 24 hours later, it's me who is essentially overriding all of that playbook, and I could completely, justify every get told you. So from all of my engineering team, a lot of them are here but it's been, yeah. So I think the most humbling experience, and that's why I think I always keep all the same thing that we have, that the service engineer should be on call, because that was the most humbling experience. Yeah. So I think would love to open floor to the questions. You have people who sort of you work with. Yeah. Am I audible?
Yeah. I come from security background. So you talked about outages and incident. Right? So I want to understand what is the role of SRE in incident response, especially the security incidents.
Security incidents are scary. Look, I think, in a security incident, it's important to limit the audience, first of all, in the incident response. That's rule number one. I pull in SREs, again, in a classical SRE role, they may not detect the security incident. It depends, again, what kind of security incident you're looking at. However, again, you effectively pull them in, or they may trigger your early warning, whether it's some rate limit being breached, or perhaps some network activity that's out of the ordinary, and so on and so forth, or someone opening the gates during a deployment, classically. So I think those, again, I would likely see them as early warning indicators, but again, given from a security perspective, you likely already have those monitors and alerts in place. So, your security response team will know about it probably as soon as it happens. So maybe not so much, but depends again on the organization how you want to do it. But number one for me in those incidents is to limit participation. Keep it tight till you know what's going on. It's very important.
So, but just to clarify, to both of you, yes or no, sir. Do you think security incident management forms under the gambit of SRE, and are we the people who should be held accountable to detect and remediate the first level of security incidents?
Again, because it's such a specialized function, at least the way that we work with Chala, so at least my mindset is very much on that, the security group will absolutely set in the monitors and the thresholds and the alerts and so on and so forth, and effectively they will run the incident, right, and keep it right. SREs will come in as and when required, take pull logs, or let's isolate the infected system or whatever, depending again on what sort of incident you are dealing with. I mean from an accountability perspective, sure, it's another incident, but yes, it requires a specialized response. That's the only difference.
Sure. So, in lines with what is previously said, primary goal is yes, you at a particular scale you will have a specialized team detect whether there is a security breach or an attempt to breach. But in either of the cases where SRE comes in is primarily to quarantine the infected area, right? Like you detected this breach over here and cut it off from rest of the network. Second thing is then you fence the entire network. Okay, now I will go about stopping what is going to happen or what all the attempts are coming in. And then you go about from the recovery phase and what has gone wrong starts cleaning. So you start cleaning whatever has gone wrong, trying to recover the system or trying to rebuild the system.
Any other question?
Yeah, I come from mid-level. I'm building an SRE team in mid-level. stage. The question for you is, I'm actually looking for polyglots who can actually be a developer, can work on the database, and at the same time, my team also has security engineers for CSP and Prisma and all that. The question to you is, how successful were you in building a team by getting engineers from the product team to be in the SRE function? Or were you more successful getting engineers from outside into the company? I want to really know an answer from each other. Thank you.
I think we have the next person.
See, I think in terms of building an SRE team, you need to get people who believe in that. So, let's say a guy really loves to play cricket, but if you tell him you have to go guard a border, you have to join the army, it may not work out really well. He may do a good job there, but that may not be the best. So, the most fundamental thing is that they need to know what the role is. And see, like there was a discussion on on-call, right? I think the major issue that comes out of it is that the person who is handling it is probably not committed to the cause. It is very important to be committed to the cause. So you have to hire the right person. If you get somebody from outside or from within, so Jay, for example, was actually a developer, but he did have the SRE attitude. So, see, in terms of, the customers first, if it is down, no matter what, I need to get it out. I need to solve for scale. Those are all problems that an SRE thinks about. I need to be able to handle on-calls. So there will be repeated issues. I need to try and fix those so that I'm not bothered by that. That's a sort of a mentality. The developer is like trying to solve problems, do innovative stuff. I'm not telling SRE doesn't do, but the field is different. So to answer your question, you have to get somebody. The most important thing is the attitude of the person towards that function.
Okay, hi. So, personally, I feel like one area that doesn't get talked about at all is database reliability. So any advice or guidance are like the most important points you folks feel like people deploying databases on their own in prod should keep in mind, or golden seconds to look at that.
Yeah, I mean, databases are a resource, so that comes into your surface. Classically, depending on the type of database you're looking at, you want to look at ingress and how much work it's taking, what type of activity. Let's say you expect to read heavy loads, but it's doing all right instead, and so on. So there is some application sort of monitors you may add as well. But again, your classical ones are good enough. So I don't know if apart from saying that given that it is a specialized resource, you're going to have to apart from your stock monitors that you may add, you're going to have to look at some other things in terms of how many times is the re-indexing, for example. So it could be depending on the type of store that you're using, and you have to end up monitoring that so that you don't run into trouble without knowing. Very short.
So just to add sort of my perspective into it, because honestly I think a lot of us will have a war story that the stateful data is at risk, and that is a different level of planning versus an application. I think that SRE playbook should be there for every application, but for databases you need to have a strong disaster recovery playbook, which doesn't come automatically for every SRE to build it out as a level 1 failure. So I think DR recovery for databases has to be a base user responsibility, and this essentially I don't think goes up to CTPO level, only on SRE level. So DR in my mind has anything stateful, not just databases but even persistent storage, which is business critical, needs to have a DR plan, and that elevates above SRE and actually goes into some of the more details of CTPO. Yes.
Just on your question, I think Polyglot's a great start, and I think if you're bootstrapping, if you're able to find cheerleaders inside your organization to come help create the first versions of it, there's nothing like it, right? And then of course, I think you want to go with the people you're hiring with, cheerleaders from inside. So I think taking people on loan or people who are willing to give or whatever they're building, I think that should hold you in good stead, especially if you're bootstrapping from zero. That will give you a lot of velocity that you can take, once these people walk away or step back a little bit. So, I think that's what I think.
Also, there's a lot of discussion that happens about what the right level of metrics to have is. So, as you mentioned, you have to look at what the customer value service is doing. So, on that note, do you folks feel like there is some improvement that you can do over just plain logs, like it's tracing something that you see as picking up the data stream, or is that just a hypothetical sort of thing?
No, it's not. I mean, tracing is expensive, man. Most people write traces and logs, so that's another problem to take about it. But no, look, if I think you were talking about a few minutes ago, if once you are in an incident and you have trouble, having good logs to help you triage, create causality, especially in a very large microservice environment with heterogeneous data sources and whatnot, having that ability to paint what's happening, that's very critical. So I don't think there's no life cycle loss. If you don't know what's happening in your product, it was good anyway.
Yeah, but I would like to add one word of caution when you are doing this right thing. Too much logs will eventually be a bigger problem than not having logs, right? So you at one point of time you need to find a sweet spot at what you want to log and trace and what you should not. That eventually will come with as the system grows, and you will start seeing what are the common pitfalls and what are the areas where systems are failing. You will start tracing that. Not always you need to log everything, and not always you need to not log everything. Because when systems are not working and you are bombarded with thousands of lines of logs, it becomes a pain to find out which, like there are so many false positives and red herrings over there that identifying that this is the exact cause of a failure becomes a problem.
Yeah, it's like this is the point I was trying to make with the traces as logs. The one way you try to stem it is effectively to start everything off with quotas and immediately fill it up, and then you realize it's a lot of tracing. Right? And I think you want to paper exercise some of your what's happening to my product to see if your logs are truly effective. Again, it's too late if you are in an incident and you realize your logs are junk. So that's also another thing you can do to mitigate. If you should be doing dry runs anyway to kind of see the readiness of the on.
I think we have time for one last question. Looks like I have a question. Questions on live stream?
Probably tell me. That's telling me.
No, there is no online presentation.
Perfect. Alright, I really want to thank you, Akash, for taking the time and sharing your stories, but also thank you both Krishna and Jay for being such a good sport and jumping in. It was great to share some war stories, and I think most of us have been in the trenches, so it becomes a very fun time to have these episodes. Thank you so much, Zena,
I'm very true to your reputation for managing all of this. But hopefully we have a backup for the failure of audio by having the recording. And I think my colleague has done a fail-safe by doing 3 levels of recording. Okay, so I'm hoping Ankit and Akash will hang around for about 15-20 minutes more. There is some tea and biscuits. Thank you for organizing all of this, and hopefully folks can also interact here. We've shared a feedback form. Please share it with us because we value your time and we want to ensure that this is not a waste of your time. And how do we do more of this if this was interesting for you? So thanks again, and there's an SRE conference on the 24th of November, and I'm hoping some of the folks here as well as in PhonePe are going to submit this week. As we've discovered over here, it's really about reliability and sort of keeping the lights on, and not so much about bigness all the time. Thank you again. Thanks, Akash.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Please share your feedback forms, feedback forms with the table. Thank you. Thank you.